Thank you for joining us for this week's message at Crosswind Church. If you have any questions about this message or about Crosswind Church, please visit us at www.crosswindchurch.net, or you can email us at info@crosswindchurch.net.
Well, I know that I get a little bit of a reputation. If you've been around for a little while at Crosswind, I get a little reputation for being a little bit of a Grinch or a bah humbug around Christmas time. The truth is, since I was a child, loved Christmas. I really love to give gifts that are, I'm just not good at it. Like, I just can't think about what to buy. It's always stressful for me, and I have high anxiety from it and all of that. Maybe you experience that. But I do love Christmas, and I do love what surrounds it. But when I think back on Christmas as a child, some of you kids that are here now, you can empathize with me, because when I look back on it as a child, Christmas was anything but peaceful. It was very stressful time, especially Christmas Day. So the way it kind of worked in my house was this. Christmas morning, Mom would get up before everybody else. She just kind of woke up early. Back even then, I had trouble going to sleep because I was excited about Christmas, but I also had trouble waking up the next morning. So Mom would put on music, she would rattle around in the kitchen, she did whatever she could to kind of wake me up. Sometimes she actually had to come into my room and wake me up for Christmas. We'd come down and there would be a tree with presents. I was the only child, so I had lots of presents. And we opened presents, and I got all the shiny new toys and all of that kind of stuff. And got to play with it for just a little bit, because by about 8 or 8:30 we had to be eating breakfast. Christmas morning was one of the few mornings that we actually ate like real breakfast. Not a Pop-Tart, not a bowl of cereal, but we had, like, you know what I'm talking about, right? We had like a little bit of time to cook some eggs and some bacon and sausage or whatever. I remember having that as a kid. But by about 11 o'clock, we had to be ready to go. Toys had to be, put them down, and we had to be showered and dressed and eaten and everything, because noon was when lunch happened at my grandmother's house, my dad's parents. And so we had to get over there. We had to be there by noon, so we got there early, I remember. And there was uncles and cousins and some of the best food that I ever remember eating at my grandma's house. And we would open more presents, and my granddaddy would pass out envelopes with money in them. Maybe y'all remember that. It's so incredible. And so we'd get all of those things. And about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we would load up everything, all the new gifts we got, all of the stuff we got to get, say goodbye to the cousins. And we'd get in the car and we would drive into town where my mom's family lived, and there we would meet them for I don't know what you call it. My mom's family has this weird thing, and maybe y'all do it too. I thought it was normal until I got married, and I realized that no one else I knew did this. My mom's family likes to eat a meal, like Thanksgiving and Christmas, in the middle of the afternoon, like at 3 o'clock, 3:30. Anybody else do that? Okay, thank you. I thought I told you to stay in the car. Anyway. Just kidding. Anyway, so like we would get together, and we had just eaten turkey and dressing and mashed potatoes. My grandmother made, my dad's mom made the best mashed potatoes ever. We'd just eaten all of that, and then now we're going to eat again at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon at my other grandparents' house. And there was more presents, and there were more cousins, and more aunts and uncles, and all of that sort of thing. We had those weird kind of relationships and awkward conversations sometimes you have with one another at family. And as the evening kind of progressed, we'd get to about 6 or 6:30, maybe 7 o'clock, and then we'd load all up in the car again, and we had some family friends. She had been my piano teacher, and somehow our families kind of hit it off in a weird kind of way. And so, like, they always invited us over to their house on Christmas night for dinner. And so we would eat our 4th meal of the day. We would get in the car and we'd go over to their house, and I was more than likely going to be the only child at their house. Sometimes some grandkids would show up, but I was the only kid that was there. So I'd sit in the living room and watch TV while they sat around the table and talked about how weird their families were, I guess. I don't know what they talked about. And then finally we would get in the car and we would drive home, and I would walk in my house, and there would be all of the wonderful shiny toys that I had unwrapped 12 hours or more before, and hadn't had a chance to play with it. And you walk in literally just like, I'm going to bed later, right? You just fall into bed exhausted. That's what I thought it was like. So much so that it bothered me I didn't get to play with my toys much on Christmas, that I decided that when I got to be a grown-up, that I just wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going anywhere for Christmas. And then I got married. And my wife's family lives in Birmingham, Alabama, and my family lives in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and we got married and moved to Texas. And so like we actually would call it the triangle trip. We would get in the car, we would do it for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. It was insane. We'd get in the car with our dog later after we had kids. We'd load up, and Emma, this was before Abby was born, we'd load up Emma in the car, and we would drive from Fort Worth, Texas to Hopkinsville, Kentucky, down to Birmingham, and then back via another route. We'd do it all in a week, and we would just be Christmas out by the time that we got home. And even this last week, on Monday, we were here, we had dentist appointments Monday morning, and then we rushed off and spent the next 4 days in 4 different locations, slept in 4 different beds, receiving and giving Christmas gifts all along the way until we hustled back here Friday afternoon. Christmas is anything but calm and silent and peaceful. It's crazy, y'all. And I think the thing is we can all tell our stories about what our whirlwind kind of Christmases look like, what it's like, because we all have traditions that we have to do, we have to keep up with. We have to be at Meemaw's for lunch on Christmas Eve, or we have to bake cookies, or we have to go and buy gifts, or we're drawing names, or we're not drawing names, and we got to buy gifts for people that we don't even like that much. We got to go and go to all of the parties that you have to have, and do all of those things that kind of surround the Christmas season. And if we could just kind of take a moment and just try to share with one another, I bet we would all go, listen, we love Christmas. We think Christmas is awesome, but man, we're so glad when it's over. Amen. Because Jesus is born, whoop-de-doo, we give the presents, and then we get to take a nap, right? Like that's what we're shooting for. It just gets so busy and so hectic that somewhere in the mix, even if we're careful about it, we lose Jesus. So if even when we're with the best of intentions, we just kind of forget about it. Because there's so much other stuff to do. It's kind of interesting. You don't have to really look to Christmas to see this in the lives of people that are Christ followers, people that are church people, right? Sometimes our lives can get so full of really good things. And sometimes even our church lives can get full of so many good things. And we know we've got this service and that service and this group and that group. And we've got mission trips and we've got funds to give to. And we've got services to attend and programming to take care of. And we volunteered. In November we did Be Rich. And you guys went out. We got to go volunteer. We got to love on people and do stuff. And it was just tedious. And it was stuff after stuff. And meeting after meeting. And thing after thing. And thing after thing. And if we're not careful, we'll actually kind of not just lose our peace. We'll lose Jesus in the mix. And I think sometimes as church people, sometimes as followers of Christ, man, we can get so guilty of that. We can fill our lives up with rules, lists, and check boxes, and somehow buy into the idea that our life and relationship with God is related to our list and rules and check boxes and rituals and services and whatever else. And in the process, we get so busy that we misplace Jesus. So a few weeks ago, we started a brand new series. It's not brand new anymore. But a few weeks ago, we started a series called He Will Be Called. We're basing it all around this one Bible passage where Isaiah wrote in chapter 9, verse 6. He said, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." And as we've gone through those names, we've kind of struggled with some of that. Everlasting Father. We all have issues that are related to our fathers. And so sometimes that causes us to push back. Wonderful Counselor. Maybe there's some pushback from that as well. Or a powerful, mighty God. But when we come to Prince of Peace, when I read that, I kind of chuckle a little bit. Because when I think about Jesus bringing us peace, I think, man, all I seem to have is lists. All I seem to have is rules and rituals and services, programming. So today, as we wrap up the series, as we kind of do so a little quickly, as we talk about it, I want to talk about how Jesus became our Prince of Peace and what that means to us. And to do so, I want to read a little bit of the Gospel of Matthew. In this story, Jesus has just sent out the disciples to do a training mission. He had given them some work to do, given them some instruction, and while he was here on earth, he was kind of training them in the process. And after he sent out the disciples, he began to teach and preach in Galilee, a region of the Near East called Galilee. And he was continuing to teach and preach there. And in the middle of his teaching and preaching, he gives us an invitation. One that was for the Jews that were listening to it that day, but one that I think is an invitation for all of us as well. So let's take a look at what he had to say. If you don't have your Bible with you, it's okay. You can totally look on the screen. If you do, it's Matthew chapter 11. We're going to begin in verse 28. If you're new to Crosswind, the way we handle this is we read a little bit and talk a little bit, and read a little bit and talk a little bit. In chapter 11, verse 28, Jesus says this, "Come to me." And before we go any farther, I want to make sure that we understand just how personal in nature this invitation is. See, to some of his disciples, he would say, "Follow me," or "Come after me." But here he looks at those that are listening. He looks at you, and he looks at me, and he says, "You, come to me." And the reason that it is so incredibly important, it's such a big deal that he would say that, is he's Jesus. He's the Son of God. He could call us to whatever it is he wanted to call us to. He could have said things like, "Come to this correct doctrine," or "Come to this particular flavor of theology," or "Come to this denomination of Christianity," or "Come to this service," or "Come to this home group," or "Come to this Sunday night church," or "Come to this program," fill in the blank, come to. He could have filled in anything there. But you want to know what he says? He says, don't come to a building. I'm not calling you to a program. I'm not saying those things are bad at all. But what I'm calling you to do is something much, much, much more personal. I'm calling you to me. Jesus is saying, "Come to me." And here's just the real truth that I want us to wrap our head around today. You see, he's not calling us to a list of rules. He's calling us to a relationship. And no good relationship can be whittled down to a list of rules that you follow. Isn't that true? No real healthy relationship can be whittled down to a list of rules and regulations and just do this. Do you want to know how I know that? It's because I've been married for almost 17 years. And I can't tell you the number of times I've gone to my wife, much to her frustration, when she's upset with me or mad at me, which is more often than I'd like to admit, and she says things like this, she wants me to be more romantic, or she wants me to dote on her more, or whatever it may be. And I just say to her, "Listen, we'll make this easy. If you'll just give me a list, just tell me the things it is that you want me to do and how often you want me to do them. I will be happy to do those things if they make you happy." And her response is not one of glee or joy. Her response is, "I don't want to have to tell you." It's about a relationship, not about a list of rules. If you've ever fallen in love, you know that. The second that you have to tell somebody or put rules around something, it takes something away from it, doesn't it? It takes a little bit of the heart out of it. I'm still working on that because I like rules and I like boundaries and I like to kind of know rather than just kind of feel it out. But here's what Jesus says. Look, our relationship, your relationship with Jesus can never be, was never meant to be whittled down to a list of rules or check boxes. No healthy relationship is. Jesus didn't call you to ritual. Jesus didn't call you to services, or Jesus didn't call you to whatever you might think. He calls you to himself. "Come to me," he says. The next part says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened." Praise God, because I am weary and burdened. Aren't you? Come on, it's Christmas time. We're all weary and burdened, right? We carry the burdens of being dads and husbands and sons and daughters and mamas and grandmamas. We carry the burdens of our job and of pastoring a church, whatever that burden may be that you kind of carry with you. I'm not trying to diminish those burdens, but that's not exactly what Jesus is talking about. You see, Jesus is talking to a list of Jews who would have understood exactly what he meant when he said, "You who are burdened and weary." Because to be a good Jew, your relationship with God was dependent on you being obedient to over 600 laws that were written. It required you to not only obey those laws, but to not break any of the rules that the powers that be put in place so you wouldn't come close to breaking a law. They had oral tradition, they had laws, there were all these things they had to do, and it was a burden. In fact, years later, the disciples would get together in Jerusalem and they would have a conversation about these rules and these laws, and the conversation would go something like this: "We shouldn't put the burden on the Gentiles that we as Jews couldn't bear ourselves." And so when Jesus is talking here about burden, what he's talking about is the religious burden that society has put upon the Jews to have a right relationship with God. And the thing that makes this applicable to us is that if we're not careful, and in so many parts of our society today, we have made our relationship with Jesus so about do this and don't do this, go here and don't go here, that we're no better than first century Pharisees. And it's become burdensome. It's become tiresome. You've grown weary. In fact, there's some of you that are here today because it's Christmas. And you promised your grandma that you'd come, and you promised your daddy you'd come. They promised they'd buy you lunch afterwards, or you thought there'd be some cute girl here, whatever it is, you're here because it's Christmas. And the reason that you haven't been here before now is because of this very reason. Because you thought somehow your relationship with God would be defined based on how you behaved. And she's going, no, that'll make you tired. That'll wear you out. Come to me. He finishes. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Look at the last 2 verses in this chapter. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, we don't use yokes anymore. Right? We have tractors. Those that don't know it, a yoke was a piece of wood that would be put over a couple of oxen or a couple of donkeys to kind of help channel their pulling power in one direction as they pulled a wagon or as they pulled a plow or some farm implement. But we don't necessarily use that anymore, so it's kind of hard for us to kind of visualize. But the Jews, they weren't necessarily talking about a literal yoke. Jesus didn't say, when you follow me, you get this piece of wood and you strap it to your shoulders. That's not what he said. What Jesus says is this, the idea of a yoke was an idea that the Jews had come up with. They viewed the law as a yoke. It was these boundaries, this rigid boundary to keep you in place, to keep you obedient. And it was heavy for the Jews, and it was burdensome for the Jews. And Jesus says, I'm not going to give you license to dismiss obedience. I'm going to change the reason you are obedient. I'm not going to take away all of the law. I'm going to fulfill the law. So what Jesus says he's going to do for us is he's not going to take away the responsibility. He's going to exchange it. This is really neat. He's going to exchange the yoke of the law, the yoke of slavery to the law, the yoke that is so burdensome to the Jews, the yoke that so many of us and so many people in our society that claim to be Christ followers follow or have on their shoulders. The lists and the rules and the programming and the have-tos, right? I'm going to take that away and I'm going to replace it, Jesus says, with my yoke. Still there's obedience, still there's things that you have to do. But what Jesus says is my yoke, compared to the yoke of the law, my yoke is easy and thy burden is light. Now, let me tell you what it means. Jesus says, I'm going to exchange 613 Old Testament laws and an oral tradition for the law of love. John chapter 13, verse 35, a verse that has characterized my entire ministry, characterizes Crosswind Church. By this will the world know that you are my disciples, by the way that you attend service regularly. That's not what it says. By this will the world know that you're my disciples, by the way that you love one another. What Jesus has done is he says, I'm going to replace all the law. I'm going to fulfill it in these 2 commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. I'm going to exchange the rule of law with the law of love. And that, by the way, is much easier. It's much easier to understand. It's much easier to comprehend. But here's the catch. You ready? It's much more demanding of us. See, when following Jesus, my relationship with God is defined by me being obedient to laws for the sake of laws. Do you want to know what happens there? I can retreat to my sanctuary. I can retreat to my seat in church or my pew in church. I can retreat to my home or to my prayer closet or to my quiet spot where I get by myself. I can fulfill those check boxes and check them all off, right? And they're good things that we should check off, right? We should pray, we should read our scriptures, and we should attend church services. But when my relationship with God is defined only by those personal disciplines, it's easy for me to withdraw from society and just kind of isolate myself individually. But when I take Jesus' yoke of love upon me, do you want to know what happens? Now it demands more of me. Now I have to move outside of my wall and actually interact with people. Sometimes that can be hard. You've been to Walmart, right? Good night, y'all. What is going on with the people at Walmart? Some of them are you. Yesterday, I did something foolish. Jody and I, we needed to go buy groceries. And so we were like, we should go to Walmart on the day before Christmas Eve and buy groceries. That was one of the dumbest things I've ever done in my life. I'm walking around, and there are people, right, that will just stop in the middle of an aisle for no reason. And I'm a guy that's on purpose. I don't shop, I hunt. And so what are you doing? And there's people that just like, oh, look, they've got attention deficit, something, whatever. They got all the letters, you know what I'm saying? And they're like all over the place, and they're bumping into each other, and they're clogging up the aisles, and you kind of know what I'm talking about. I was talking to my friend Dylan yesterday. He called me and said, what are you doing at Walmart? I said, so silly. It's like, I know. Let me tell you what I had to do. I'm not making this up. I did this. Every time I would lock eyes with somebody, I would say this in my brain, they matter to God. Made in the image of God. They matter to God. I had to do it, right? Because people are crazy. And if you haven't seen crazy people at Walmart, that's you. Look, here's the thing. Watch, come on. When Jesus says, I'm going to replace the yoke of the law with the yoke of love, that requires more of us. It's easier. There's less check boxes. It requires us to get out and to interact with other people. And Jesus says somehow when you do that, then you get rest. Somehow when you do that, then there's peace. And Jesus has become our Prince of Peace. But do you want to know the secret? He didn't become our Prince of Peace in a manger. He became our Prince of Peace on the cross. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 5 says this, but he was pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us, what's the word? Peace, was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. See, what Jesus does for us is he provides a way for a new relationship with God. Not a relationship that's characterized by rules and rituals and services and check boxes, even though all of those things are wonderful. Not a relationship that's characterized by programming and attendance and giving, even though those things are wonderful. A relationship that's characterized by a call. Come to me. Come to the manger. Come live the adventure. Come to the cross. There you'll find peace. Today I want to challenge you to do something in the middle of the hustle and bustle of your Christmas. I know you're looking at watches and we got to be at malls in 50 minutes or whatever. I get it. Look. I'm not saying that you should get rid of the presents or the lights or the movie watching or the cookie baking. No, do all those things. I'm not trying to say that. But I wonder if you would do something. This is a tradition that's been in my family since I was a little boy. I wonder if tonight, before the kids go to bed, while they're still all hyped up on sugar and hot chocolate and the cookies are set out for Santa, would you do this with your family? I wonder if you would turn the TV off. Not mute it. Turn it off. I wonder if you would sit down as a family and open up your Bible and just read the story of Jesus' birth. Just remember what it is that he's done for you. Just remember the sacrifice that was made so that you might have peace. And in the middle of the hustle and the hubbub and the nastiness and the whirlwind, right before the traveling and right before Santa and right before the unveiling of all of the amazing presents and wrappings and tinsels and trappings and long before the elf maybe even goes back to the North Pole. If you just pause and remember and find peace. Matt's going to come, he's going to lead us in a song that's going to take us back to the cross. It's going to take us back to remember what it was that Jesus has done for us. We've got some other things planned in the service that we'll do here in just a minute. But I wonder if right now, if we could just pause and bow our heads and remember about how Jesus gave us peace that day in Calvary when he arrested death. Thank you, God, for being our Prince of Peace. Thank you for being our almighty God. Thank you for being our wonderful counselor. And thank you, God, so much for being our everlasting Father forever and ever. Thank you, God, that you call us not to a ritual or not to a list of rules. You call us to yourself. This Christmas season, help us to pause and remember that to which you have called us. In Jesus' name I pray these things. Amen.